So sometimes parents will say to me that they think they're like immune to this. They think that this wouldn't happen to us, or if it did, my kid would tell me, and it's like, nice idea. I like where your head's at. I'm with you. That would be nice. But statistically, it doesn't work like that. Statistically, even if you have a really good relationship with your kid, the likelihood that they are gonna disclose abuse to you is very, very, very low because the shame is so huge and because they think it's their fault and they don't wanna get in trouble or they don't want the other person to get in trouble, and so they don't say anything. The other little fun fact that is horrifying and compelling is and I learned this at a PD, and I've never been able to actually find this nugget of data again, but I can vouch for this in my anecdotal experience as a therapist. The presenter said that the average age of disclosure of abuse is 52. Now that, I think, is also based on past generations, obviously, and that would fit because past generations weren't raised with emotional literacy and connected parenting and all of that kind of stuff. So that makes sense to me. If I think about my career of doing this work for, over 20 years, that checks out that the number of clients I've had that are in their 50s and have said to me, this is the first time I've ever said these words out loud, or this is the first time I've ever told anyone this, but and then they proceed to share a abuse disclosure from childhood. I like, oh my gosh, hundreds probably of in that age demographic. So many people will just keep this stuff locked away. And when I say locked away, it's not like people forget. It's just the brain in its infinite wisdom of trying to protect oneself and to survive kind of looks at the data at say age 5, 10, whatever, and goes, this is not really going to help us to bring this to the forefront and, acknowledge how intense this is or painful this is and how helpless we feel. Let's just put it down. And like, it's like the brain and the body know that it's shoving it down, but there's also this part of the person, I think, that doesn't really realize they're just shoving it down, down, down. I have this conversation almost every week with clients about something that they pushed down for decades and didn't want to admit to themselves. Like, I didn't forget what my brother did to me. I didn't forget what my soccer coach did to me. I didn't forget what those girls did to me on camp, but I kind of did. I kind of shoved it down and out of my mind, or that date I went on in high school or college and the guy forced himself on me. I didn't forget about it, but I just kind of put it so far to the side or pushed it so far down, it wasn't real. And I think I just lied to myself or just told myself that didn't happen, or that was consensual, or it wasn't that bad, or I was drunk, or whatever. I talked to myself out of it. And that works for a time. And then it's kind of like, time's up. The bill's due. The body is not cool anymore with forgetting and pretending like it didn't happen. So I say this to say, when I am talking about shame in the shame module and saying I'm throwing my best stuff at you with why shame isn't a great way to parent. I'm like begging you essentially in that module. Here is the data. Here is the research. Here is how the brain works. Here is how spicy kids work. I'm making a case of I'm trying to be so compelling and you see why shame isn't a good play. And I guess what I'm saying to you now in this video and in this context is it's not just all that. It's also a sexual abuse and abuse in general, bullying in general, like protective behavior to not shame them. It's an abuse prevention tactic. Because a lot of parents will ask me, how do, like, I was abused as a child. How do I make sure my kid doesn't get abused? And the first thing I will rant about is shame. Is how's the shame going in your parenting? Do you use shame as a tool? Do you use it regularly? Do you use it once a week? Do you use it 10 times a day? What's your relationship with shame in your parenting? That's always where I start because a lot of parents don't even realize how much they are creating a dynamic with their kids, but especially spicy kids because they are so challenging that it brings out the ugly of us, I think, in our parenting with shaming and yelling. And, I know I am not my best self and not my best parenting self with my spicy. And I know that's the same for the rest of you. So I talk to you all day long when I am seeing clients. It's just like plead is the only word I can think of. Like, I'm pleading with you. This isn't just about, and you know what too? This goes out to a lot of the dads, because a lot of the dads fight me on this because they'll say like, well, you just gotta tell them that this is what's right and wrong, and you gotta show them, and you gotta be firm, and you gotta be tough, and I have this kinda clash, I guess, a lot with dads who still sort of like to do the shaming, and, "What are you doing?" and, "I told you we can't do that." Like, I'm looking at you, person who thinks that. This isn't just about parenting in the way that Heidi suggests because it's cute and cuddly. I'm, like, begging you as a clinician who supports people who have experienced abuse, please, please just don't do the shame. Like, I'll compromise and say, you can yell, yell, but please don't do the shame. That's the one thing, please, because if stuff is happening, they're not going to come to you, even if you have a good relationship. But if you are shaming them constantly throughout the day from the minute they wake up because they're not getting dressed quickly enough or properly, or they forgot their violin or whatever, it's so unlikely that a kid is gonna disclose anyway, even if you have a good relationship. But if you are shaming them constantly throughout the day, or just being critical or just being frustrated with them, I guarantee you they are not going to disclose if someone is grooming them, or a kid is bullying them, or another peer is abusing them, or a teacher or grown up or a family member, whatever. They are not going to disclose out because they will not feel that they can trust you with that, because they all always feel like they're in trouble with you. They always feel like they're doing the wrong thing. And abuse is a huge bucket of, I feel like I'm doing the wrong thing and you're going to be disappointed in me. And a lot of times, spicy kids can be a target. A lot of times, spicy kids can be an easy target for perpetrators because they're used to being in trouble a lot. They're used to being the bad kid. They're used to parents who go, ugh, whatever, and not having adequate supervision or not being connected to their parents because they are challenging. The parents disconnect and kind of alienate themselves from the kid because the kid is just a lot. And those kids stand out. Those kids stand out. So I'm like imploring you to not just don't do the shamey thing because it's research and this is where I think my bigger urgency and passion comes from, is having had so many conversations with people, children and adults, who and across the lifespan, who have been abused, and having that conversation about, who did you talk to about it? Who did you share this with? And it's like, I don't know, 98% of the time the answer is nobody. I just sat with it and I kept it to myself, and I just lived decades like that. And that breaks my heart because it doesn't need to be like that. And I'm not just talking about abuse. I'm talking about all sorts of bad shit that happens in an everyday life. There's lots of bad crap that happens to people, not just that. But the secondary trauma, you guys, in a lot of traumatic experiences is the fact that I had nobody to talk to about it, and I was all alone in it. I can tell you a million conversations I've had with adults over my career about drug use, alcohol use, abortion, bullying, cheating, lying, all sorts of being human mistakes. And yes, the thing that happened was traumatic, but people will always say the more painful part, the harder part to reconcile, was the fact that I was all alone. And either my grown-ups didn't check in on me and ask, or I didn't have a connected enough relationship with them that I could go to them and I could talk to them about this, or I felt like they would believe me. Okay. That part of, why didn't I tell? Because I was afraid they wouldn't believe me, or I knew they wouldn't believe me, or nobody's going to believe me. Some variation of that. That's probably the number one thing I hear from people with anything, not just abuse, any kind of problem or mistake or whatever thing that involves shame. People are so afraid, but especially children, of telling people because they're afraid they're not going to be believed. So this is why when your kid tells you, aliens came to me in my bedroom last night, Or I they have chocolate all over their face and they say, "I didn't eat chocolate." You say the first thing out of your mouth, "I believe you." Even if you don't, "I believe you. I believe you." And that even just with spices can be a game-changing technique, strategy, phrase. "I believe you." And then I can continue to question whatever you're saying, like the chocolate around your mouth. But if I lead with, "I believe you. I believe you," it can put somebody's defenses down. They don't feel like they have to then, explain themselves or whatever. If you just lead with, "I believe you. Let's see how we can figure this out," or "Let's see how we can clean up your face." Because what I'm trying to do is create a culture in our home and a culture and a pattern in our dynamic and in our relationship and how we communicate that the answer out of my mouth is always going to be, "I believe you. I believe you. I believe you." If school calls me and says, "Such and such problem happened with my kid at school," I want them to know that nobody can ever kind of hold them hostage or threaten them or scare them, that I'm going to call your mom, because they'll be like, "Rad, call my mom. I know she'll have my back." And I tell that to my kids all the time. I don't ever want you to be worried if you get in trouble at school or at an extracurricular thing or at someone's house. I will always have your back and I will always believe you. And I will always know that if you did dumb stuff or stuff that you shouldn't have done, I will know you had a really good reason for doing that in the moment. And I just need to talk to you so you can explain to me what happened. And if you build that kind of a culture, then that's exactly what happens. Then when they've made a mistake, they'll either say to you, "Yeah, I blew it. Shouldn't have done that or said that. But I did it because, all the other kids were blah, blah, blah. And I felt like this was the only way to blah, blah, blah." They will have a reason in the moment. And sometimes they'll say, "Yeah, I shouldn't have done that." Yeah. And I learned this too from my clients, especially when I worked with adolescents, especially when I worked in prison, that if I always told somebody, "I believe you, I know you wouldn't lie to me, and I know that whatever happened, you would have had a good reason for doing it, and it made sense to you at the time and in that split second, and maybe you weren't thinking 5 steps down the track," which most Spiceys don't often think 5 steps down the track, but I believe you that in that moment, it felt like that was the only option you had. And if I create that kind of dynamic, but you see how I'm not shaming? I'm going in so open and so curious and so compassionate. That then creates this like fertile ground for the other person to learn, to reflect on what I did was dumb or hurtful. And then I can like see that, learn that, ah, change, grow, learn new skills, evolve, whatever you want to call it. But if I lead with shame and if I go in with, "How could you? And why'd you do that? And we've been over this before. And what did you think was going to happen?" If I lead with that, none of that rich soil stuff happens. There's none of that growth. There's none of that learning. Shame shuts down your ability to learn. Shame shuts down your ability to even believe that you are capable of change. Because if I'm bad and unlovable and stupid and whatever, I can't learn, I can't grow, I can't change, I can't get better. So if you are going to have conversations with your kids about mistakes or stuff that they've done that are not super choices, lead with, "I believe you. I believe you. I know you wouldn't lie to me. I trust you. I just want to figure out what happened so it can like not happen again, or I can help you get out of it." But do you see how, like, you're not gonna go to the person if you just think in your life, of your friends and your family, your colleagues, whatever, who would you go to if you made an epic mistake or did something really hurtful or something you're really ashamed of? Who are you gonna go to with that face of like, "Oh, I did this thing I shouldn't have done." Who are you gonna go to? You're gonna go to people that over time, historically have shown you, you can come to me with that stuff. I'm not gonna shame you. I'm not gonna judge you. I'm gonna say, "Where's the body and where are we gonna hide it?" Like, I'm gonna go to those people who are going to have my back and say, "I'll get the shovel." Like, that's what I want to have with my kid. And if I'm shaming them about shoes and the picking up their towel in the bathroom or turning off their tech, if I'm constantly shaming them in all these little micro moments, they're not going to come to me when that happens. I'm not gonna get the invite. I'm not gonna get the opportunity to grab the shovel. If this sounds really morbid, I'm not gonna get that call. And sweet Jesus, if we are talking about the teenage years where I like really need you to have your A game on as parents, where I really need you to be not doing the shame thing, if they are stuck somewhere at 2 a.m. with a car full of drunk people and a driver who's drunk, I want them to call you at 2 a.m. and go, Mom, Dad, yeah, not where I said I was going to be. I'm with a bunch of drunk kids somewhere. I need you to come pick me up on the side of the road. Don't you want to be there for that call? I do. I want you to be there for that call because what's going to happen if you're not there? What are they going to do? In their infinite wisdom of 14 years old or 17 years old, they're going to try to figure it out for themselves with an immature brain, poor impulse control, lacking logic and reasoning, and a fully developed cortex. They're going to try to figure it out on their own. Probably will make it worse. I want them to call you when they've had too much to drink and they don't know where they are. I want them to call you when they found themselves pregnant and they don't know what to do. I want them to call you when they tried a drug and now something is happening for them and they don't know what's happening, but they feel really scared. I want them to call you when all of their friends are excluding them and laughing at them and they're stuck in some bathroom somewhere. I want them to call you. I want you to be their infinite exit strategy. How many of us had that in our parents' hands? Like, not many of us had that in our parents. And if you had that kind of relationship with your parent, call them today and tell them that that's amazing and that they're a unicorn. It's not common. How do you get that kind of relationship where your kid will call you with that stuff? By running a tight ship for you on your shame game, like your shame ship, running a tight ship where I shame minimally. And if I do, I own it as quick as I can. And I apologize and I repair. And I explain to them that that wasn't okay, that I shamed them. We're just acknowledging, especially with spices, because you guys know they make lots of mistakes and they have poor impulse control.